These are highlights from the show you are about to view. Watch this video for an excellent summary of what it takes to be an animal behaviour training consultant specialising in parrots. So, if career success for you means working with parrots, how do you get there? Jezenia Ali describes how her experience, expertise and career developed. Hers was an unconventional career path, which allowed her to acquire numerous people skills along the way. Jezenia explains the skills and personal qualities a person needs to work with people and the parrots who own them. Parrots first appeared in the fossil record 23 to 20 million years ago, and then speciated out 23 to 5.3 million years ago. If you are learning English as a second language, this video will be useful because you will hear two accents, a British and a South African one. And before we go any further, I would like to say thank you to my subscribers. Without you, there would be no channel. I appreciate the support of each and every one of you. Training parrots and living the wildlife looks like this. Jezenia, what do you do?
I'm a parrot behaviorist and trainer, so I basically help people to work with their birds, train their birds, whether it be helping them to overcome a behavioral issue. What we see a lot of is aggression, screaming, self-mutilation, stuff like that. But I also specialize in free flight training to help people to rehabilitate their birds for flight or to raise their birds to fly, which is pretty awesome.
Wow, how did you get into this?
Well, I actually started when I was quite young. I've always had a love for animals. So I actually started in wildlife rehabilitation at age 7. I worked by myself for a while, self-taught, didn't really have anyone professional in the industry to help me. But then I was discovered later on by an organization, started working with them with wildlife rehabilitation. But I've always had a specific love for birds. I've always been drawn to them. So at some point, I switched over to parrot behavior and I haven't really looked back because I absolutely love it.
Where do you think your passion comes from for the parrots, Jezenia?
I've always been raised around animals, and I think birds in particular. So we had birds from a very young age. We had a lot of parrots as I was growing up, but at some point I had a female eclectus, and she became my bird, even though she was my mom's bird at first. But she became my best friend as a kid, and unfortunately, I didn't take care of her properly, and I had a lot of regret about it because she died prematurely because of my improper care for her. And I swore I'd never have a bird again. But there's something about parrots, their intelligence, the fact that they can speak and fly and work with us is there's just nothing else quite like them. So at some point I turned back to parrot. I said I'd never own a parrot again, but I have 11 of them now. So that didn't really work out. But yeah, that's pretty much where the passion comes from, is trying to kind of redeem myself for what I couldn't do for my eclectus as well.
That's amazing. Um, Jezenia, what skills do you need to work as an animal behaviourist and trainer?
Well, if we're talking about maybe unconventional skills, one thing that I see is you have to be observant. So you're working with animals who are unpredictable. You have to have a good memory. You have to find patterns in their behavior and then be able to change that behavior. So you have to also be patient. And you have to be confident. You cannot fear the animal you're working with, because animals, when you're working with training, they do stuff like that's very important. And then if you're looking at running a business, it's like running any other business, especially if you're doing it by yourself. There's some skills that you're going to really need to kickstart your career. So to understand how to maybe run a website or to reach out to people, how to market properly to get people, make them realize that they do need your skills.
People coming into this, Jezenia, who lack the necessary skills, How can they gain those skills?
One thing that I've found very important is having a good source of information, and multiple sources of information. Another thing that is very helpful to acquire the necessary skills is if you can find a very diplomatic mentor. So someone who's not biased and who's open to change and research, that really helps you to adapt in your methodology, and to evolve in your understanding of training. And also joining communities who share fact-based research is also quite helpful to get those skills.
Are there any courses that new people into animal training need to do? I gather that having a degree is not necessarily critical, but are there any other skills, any other courses that would be useful?
There's definitely a range of different courses available online. Um, I would say that you just need to research them properly to make sure that you're going for a course that's going to give you what you need for the goals you have within your career. But there's definitely a lot of people out there who are very knowledgeable and have great courses. But the other thing that I would suggest for people looking to get into this and who are looking at courses is to make sure that the courses are up to date.
And with a business like yours, Jezenia, what sort of goals might an animal behaviorist set for themselves?
It depends what niche you choose. Obviously, mine is quite a niche with parrots. It's not a very usual job to have. So it depends what animal you're working with. But I suppose a few goals you could set is to become a lot more understanding of the animals that you're working with, and to how can I put this? To basically be able to work with people. Working with people is actually very important. And one thing that I've seen a lot working in the animal world is you can become very bitter towards people, but they're actually the ones you want to reach in order to reach the animals. So to become a good people person is key in order to help animals, if that is your goal. And that is a really great goal to have because you want to be able to work with humans and animals.
A lot of people who want to work in the animal industry with animals, certain numbers of them do not have in their perception those people's skills. I used to be one of them.
Yeah,
How can they acquire
really.
those skills?
How do they acquire those skills? I think, like I said, realizing that you have to reach people. Also, working with great people. So find people who you can tolerate and find people who have similar goals as you and who work with animals in a similar manner that you do. And then really just learn from them and also find someone who works with animals who is good with people and see how they interact. Another thing that I've told volunteers in the wildlife rehabilitation is see the difference between if you are rude towards a person who you're trying to get them to help an animal, or if you're kind towards them, and see the difference. See which one works better for you. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to have better results if you're kind towards people, because that's what humans are drawn to. And what I've seen in my experience is being kind towards people and being patient with them actually has allowed me to help more animals, or help animals to a greater extent, especially working in the rescue world. So that's what I would say with acquiring those skills.
How would you describe bird training methods today, and what effect, if any, does politics have in regulating the industry?
So like I mentioned earlier, bird training methods are based on a few basic skills, like any other type of animal training. So we actually use the same sort of foundational training skills that you would use with animals like horses to monitor lizards to big cats. It's all very similar. So we're talking again about classical conditioning, operant conditioning, positive reinforcement is obviously one of the biggest ones, clicker and target training. That's how we that's the kind of methods, sorry, that we use with bird training. Very similar to most other types of animal training. And then when you're talking about politics, politics can be found obviously in every corner of the animal world. If you're talking politics surrounding conservation, that's probably the biggest one that we find with birds because it plays a role in human relationships. And as soon as something affects human relationships, that's when you see politics, because humans are the ones who bring politics onto the scene. So it kind of affects the industry in that aviculturists, for example, and conservationists don't see eye to eye on a lot of things. That's the one part of politics. And then obviously the other part is looking at NPOs, rescue organizations who maybe don't see eye to eye and have different viewpoints or methodology when looking at certain aspects of husbandry or care or rehoming or what the situation in the world should be like ideally. That's where we see the most politics, and that's where politics plays the biggest role.
Jezenia, do you find that in your work you have to face and challenge a lot of popular misconceptions about the way that animals learn?
Yes, yeah. Well, maybe not so much with how they learn, because like I said, that's kind of universal, the methods we use. But what we see the biggest issue with is our foundational steps. So there's a few fundamental keys that we start with when training an animal. And there's a lot of controversy around there. Like, for example, diet. We can never see eye to eye with when it comes to diet with parrots, and that is essential for training that animal. An animal's diet and routine and environment and all that is what leads to it being able to be trained. There's also another controversial topic that we speak a lot about at Naturally Captive. People don't like to hear it much, but it is to do with wing clipping. We don't agree with it, and there's a lot of research behind why we don't agree with it, but we find that a lot of people are often driven more by emotion rather than what's right for their bird. And that leads to them becoming very adamant that wing clipping is the safest option, for example. So yeah, we encounter stuff like that pretty much every day.
What are the first steps in training?
Okay, so I think it'll differ depending on what behaviors you speak to. But for Naturally Captive, our belief is to start with 5 foundational steps. So that is diet, routine, environment, training, and exercise. So those are the 5 that we start with because they are the 5 most misunderstood concepts of parrot husbandry, and also the 5 most important. So we start with that. We help people to change all of the aspects within those 5 topics. And then from there, we see great progress with regards to behavior. And then we can train a bird to do other things from there, whatever it is that the owner wants them to be able to do.
What questions regarding bird training would you like to see answered in, say, the next 5 years?
So that's a good one. And it actually is linked to the question that I just answered. I'd like for wing clipping, the question of should I clip my bird's wings? I'd like it to be an answer of no.
What equipment do you need?
So currently we offer courses that are done individually with people, which is basically made up of 4 consultations. And we do them mainly from my office here in South Africa. And depending on how far out, because obviously South Africa is huge, depending on how far out our clients are, sometimes I'll do house calls, but not very often. So that's with regards to that. And then we also have an online course, which is coming up that we're busy designing for international clients as well. But in terms of the equipment, we use very basic equipment, to be honest with you. We use clickers, which are used by dog trainers as well. So you can find them at any pet shop. We use target sticks, which you can even use a chopstick for. It's just a stick for the bird to touch the end of. And then in addition to that, we also use T-stands. T-stands are just basically a perch. That is we have tripods here, Naturally Captive, with a perch on top. So it literally looks like a T. And that's where you put your bird when you want to train with them and have them engaged with you. And in terms of free flying, we have at Naturally Captive open air aviaries. So we have quite large flight aviaries for our birds to spend most of their day in. People can come through on our open days. They practice flying in these aviaries. They can just let their birds socialize in these aviaries. And then, yeah, I mean, being in South Africa, we have big vehicles called buckies, which are helpful to go out into field because we take our birds out to field to fly them. So stuff like that is quite essential, and is what we use every day.
Wow. What did you say the stick was called? A feed stick, a tap stick,
T-stick, T-stand. Oh, the
T-stand.
target stick? Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a T-stick and there's a target stick. So yeah.
How do you use the target stick?
So basically with birds, we use like a chopstick, for example. And I don't think, let me use a pen. So you'd have your target stick like this, you'd have your bird on your T-stand, and all you want them to do is touch the end of the stick with the very top mandible. And once they touch that stick, we click to indicate that they've done the correct behavior, and then we reward them. And what we use target training for is to desensitize them to things, to get them to move from point A to point B. So to also make things not so scary, so they're following a target stick instead of being in a scary environment. And we also use it for medical training and stuff like that as well. And it's also great for stimulation and foraging. So it's a really great tool to have.
Jezenia, where do our knowledge gaps lie regarding bird training?
The gaps would lie again in those foundational steps. So when we're talking about methodology and what we're actually using with birds, there's not many gaps. Obviously, I think those gaps would mainly lie in the research that we haven't yet uncovered. But when we're talking about the basics, it's just difference in opinion where the gaps are, especially when you're in a niche like avian training. There's a lot of things that I wish a lot of trainers would be more on board with, ideas and methods and training and stuff like that. So that's where the gaps lie. It's just that we're not all on the same page, which can cause a little bit of division within.
Can you suggest a
Yeah.
research topic for a student watching this?
The direct link between declining populations of wild parrots, or maybe endangered species, and the illegal wildlife trade.
For somebody watching this, Jezenia, who wants to be you, what advice can you offer?
I would say just enjoy the journey. Try not to get caught up in the politics. It's very easy to get caught up in the politics and the emotion. The emotion of it all can be very draining and can be a lot. But try to enjoy being around animals. I mean, you get to do a job that is amazing. So many people would love what we get to do as people who work with animals. So just enjoy that. Enjoy the fact that, especially when working with birds or parrots, they're one of the most some of the animals. Work with the right people, and have your goals in mind always.
Jezenia, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, no, I'd just like to say that if you do want to work with animals, don't give up on it. It's very easy to give up. I've almost given up many times, and find what you're passionate about, because that's how you're going to stick with it in the long run.
Jezenia, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for being on the Practical Animal channel. Jezenia, naturally captive.
Thank you.